Welcome back. So some suspected illegal miners at Stilfontein say that they are being abused by leaders underground, especially when they try to leave the shaft. 12 Zamazamas who emerged from a shaft at a disused mine in the northwest yesterday have been arrested. Last week, an application by the Mining Communities United in Action to compel the state to provide food and water for the Stilfontein miners was dismissed. The food crisis has been described as a humanitarian issue, and the illegal miners deserve access to basic needs. To unpack this further, we are now joined by the lawyer representing the Society for the Protection of our Constitution, Yasmin Omar. Yasmin, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. What do you make of some of the revelations that are coming to the fore with some of the miners coming back to surface, describing the conditions that they are living under or were living under while underground, while on the other end as well, that application that was brought by the Makua, that organization being dismissed by the High Court?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. It is tragic what is unfolding in front of our eyes, be it the stories that are coming from miners who are emerging from underground. And it is what we've said all along, a humanitarian crisis unfolding in front of us. What is even more disappointing is the judgment, the most recent judgment from the High Court, which dismissed the application for food and other humanitarian aid to those underground. Because we are sitting with a situation where the court conceded in its judgment that there are people trapped underground. And that is a direct result of policing. And we know when the initial application was brought to court, the allegation made against the police and government was that you're utilizing brutal tactics and starvation tactics to get people to come up from underground in your policing endeavors. And in doing so, government has opened itself up to being responsible for those people underground. And we say respectfully, the court did not place sufficient weight on the fact that there are constitutional obligations on the state, especially in situations like this.
Yeah, but Judge Mazibuko's argument was that there is no responsibility on the state. However, though, the previous order that community members be allowed to go underground or community members supply the humanitarian aid and food still remains intact.
You see, this is an unreasonable approach to the situation, because what the judge conceded was people are trapped underground. And what is being done now is it's being conveyed to the public that the police can use this policing tactic, but the members of the community must come in and take on the responsibility of ensuring that the people underground must be fed. So we say respectfully, the court may have erred in making this finding, because it is simply not enough for government to stand by and pass the buck to someone else. So you will also note in the argument that was presented to Judge Mazibuko that the State Council argued that what about the mining companies who are responsible? What about Stilfontein and Harmony Gold? It's their mine. They've not done anything. But in doing so, they didn't bring those mining companies to court. They didn't insist, well, look, let us take measures against these mining companies, because it was their responsibility to ensure that nothing dangerous like this happens. So we have this situation where government has allowed the situation to ensue. It's taken no measures against the mining companies for not properly closing those mines. And when this disaster arises, they are now saying, well, we're still going to police, but you public, you feed the people. And that is the most unreasonable stance and an irresponsible stance, we say respectfully.
Are you saying then that the state should take responsibility for this situation because a Stilfontein mining company, which stopped operating in 2015, still did not acquire a closure certificate? And we know that it's only after closure certificate that if in the absence of a closure certificate, the mining company itself still has a responsibility to that area where it was mining. And in this particular case, not too sure whether the Mineral Resources Minister has held Mahamani mine accountable for failure to look over this particular shafts.
Well, Aldrin, what we are saying is that it's just simply insufficient for government to say, well, look to this person and look to that person. The fact is, government has allowed the situation to arise, and we said this repeatedly, and the courts have found that there is rights in the Bill of Rights that need to be protected by government. Now, government can't stand by and say, we've got this glorious constitution. People have the right to life. People have the right not to be subjected to torture and inhumane treatment, and stand by and allow it to happen. The ultimate responsibility to ensure that the rights in the Bill of Rights are protected is placed on the state, and that was confirmed repeatedly in papers presented to the court. And there's no two ways about it. The state is responsible to ensure that the rights of people trapped underground are protected. So when we look at Harmony and Stilfontein, who had those mining rights, there's no closure certificates, but you see government doing nothing. A government doing absolutely nothing to ask, why are these mines not properly closed that allowed for this crisis to unfold? And the fact that government is sitting by and just retaliating each time the matter goes to court, there is simply it's excuses saying it's not our job, it's somebody else's. But the situation was brought about by their Operation Vala Mgodi. We also had the Minister of Police tell the public in a media briefing previously that we've managed to secure the company who's going to do an extraction. The people are ready. They just need the go-ahead from me. They took on that responsibility. And for some reason, after this was all said, that wasn't done, and they left it to the community, well knowing that this is a community with minimum resources. And the community are now saying, look, we've done as much as we can. We don't have enough resources. People are dying underground, and it is insufficient for government to say, well, we've got no obligation. The obligation is there. It's in the Bill of Rights. And we've heard from mining affected communities that they are planning to take the matter up to the Constitutional Court. And we welcome that move, because it is best that the Constitutional Court interpret the rights in the Bill of Rights and whether the state has an obligation under these conditions to provide those kind of relief to the people underground.
Yeah. So on one end, the community members saying that they're running out of resources. Can't that same argument then be used for the state as well? Because the state in that application had argued that they don't have the funding that is required for this operation. The estimate was around 11.3 million rand for 11 days. And that is, according to the council representing the state, it does not include the building of the road to allow for these heavy equipment to be roped in.
This was not what the Minister of Police told us right at the outset. And I feel this is now a last-minute effort to shirk the responsibility, because you'll remember more than a month ago, the minister indicated we've got the mining company, the cages are being constructed to pull the people out. And this is a shift in stance from what was told to the public before. So the instructions of my client is this is just another excuse. And the state is straddling between either we don't have the obligation, we're doing it according to the Minister of Police, and now they say they don't have enough funding. If that were even the case, if it was a funding issue, one must ask ourselves why. The state simply hasn't gone to the mining companies whose obligation it was to ensure that that mine is properly closed and people don't get in there for a disaster like this to happen. Why have they not called upon those people to do what is required in terms of the law? So we see the government making no effort to fix this problem, but simply shirking the responsibility, saying, one, we don't have the obligation, two, we just don't have the resources. But even the minimal resources, whatever little they have, if you don't have the 11 million, where's the other resources that you have for disaster relief? Simply providing enough food, sending enough food down there. There's simply no food being sent down on the argument that there's insufficient money, but they've not told us what money, how much of money do you need to ensure food supplies are dropped down into the mine shaft?
Yeah, but to what extent will there be an expectation on the state to provide the food and the humanitarian aid? If you take into consideration, for instance, that the Kuma community that has contributed to these efforts, as well as providing food as well, they've managed to raise around 75,000 rand from Becca Buddy. So then the question is that
Yes.
if all of that aid and all of that food has gone down underground, to what end, though, would the food and humanitarian aid be supplied to the miners underground if they are not going to surface?
Well, we must remember what started all of this was an operation put in place by government. It is not the argument previously that people are just laying under there and they don't want to come out because they willfully want to hide themselves away has been found by the court not to be true. The court said these people are trapped. So one must look at it like any other kind of disaster. If we had any other kind of disaster in the country, what would be required of government? Government will respond, and government has the obligation to ensure that people are protected and their lives are protected. This is the very same situation. It's a very same situation where the obligation is there on government to ensure this is done. But what government is doing now is just throwing its hands up in the air and saying we don't want to do it because of lack of funding, but not calling upon anybody else to assist and not participating in the rescue mission. But they're standing there. There's sufficient money to ensure that police are standing around that mine constantly to apprehend the people who are coming out. So I say it's a short-sighted argument, and hopefully, when this matter is seized by the Constitutional Court, that situation will be put right.
But aren't you throwing money into a bottomless pit, essentially, when you continue to make money available and the food available and the food goes underground, but the miners are not surfacing?
How can it be a bottomless pit? What is the value of life? I mean, we've got people there who are not sitting underground because they are having a holiday underground. They are sitting there because they're trapped. And
what do you mean trapped? Trapped by who?
The court found that they were trapped.
Yeah.
They are trapped in that they can't get out. There's no way for them to come out of that the shafts underground. So Judge Mazibuko found that they are trapped. The finding was made that these people are trapped, but she felt that there was no obligation on government to ensure that food supplies are given to them. So the fact is they are trapped, and like any other trapped people, if it were any other natural disaster, government would have the obligation to go and assist the people, pull them out, and ensure that aid is given. So this is why the society has said that the people underground who are trapped, and they were detained there initially by the police and continue to be detained because of this operation. And the truth of the situation underground has emerged from miners who have come out to say that the situation underground is horrendous. People are dying. There are dead corpses. In fact, in the news a few days ago, there were suggestions that people were eating dead flesh to survive. It's a horrendous situation, and for government to throw its hands up in the air and say no, there's nothing that we can do is just simply insufficient.
What do you think the end looks like?
Well, from where we stand now, it looks like a horrendous end, in that we're probably going to be sitting with a situation where there is substantial loss of life. And it will be too sad when later on government looks at it and say, and people complain later on, but how did we allow so many people to die while we were watching? And this is a situation that has developed while we're all watching on our screens, watching the story unfold, people dying underground. And you'll remember that a host of people that were pulled up were young children. They were youngsters who were brought underground under false pretenses. They are victims of human trafficking. People were brought from across the borders, not knowing where they were going to. It's a situation where we can't allow people to sit under there and give them the sentence of death by allowing them to sit there without food and without resources.